Welcome to In this video, we delve into the twisted psyche of a man who terrorized Italy during the 1990s, leaving a trail of fear and destruction in his wake. We embark on a journey into the depths of human depravity, exploring the chilling tale of one of Italy's most infamous serial killers. Donato Belancia's name became synonymous with fear and terror during the 1990s, as he embarked on a relentless spree of violence that shocked the nation. Join us as we unravel the enigma of Belancia's life and crimes, seeking to understand the motivations behind his heinous acts and the impact they left on society. In the late 1990s, one of Italy's bloodiest serial killers was roaming around Genoa. His period of activity was short but at the same time long and complex, marked by changes in motive and modus operandi. His murderous violence exploded in those few months with all the fury repressed for decades. Donato Belancia was born in 1951 and spent his childhood in Genoa with his parents and brother. From an early age, he endured the anguish of his abusive father, who lost no opportunity to debase him in front of anyone. His discomfort soon resulted in nocturnal enuresis, which lasted until Donato's pre-adolescence and was the cause of further humiliation and mistreatment by both his parents. Although little Donato suffered greatly from this abuse, he had good grades in school. But even this changed when he went from elementary to middle school. His grades and conduct gradually deteriorated, and he began hanging out with a group of boys who taught him the basics of thieving. For Donato, it was the beginning of an authentic obsession with money, which would accompany him for years. By now, relations with his parents had completely deteriorated. Although the physical abuse persisted, Donato continued on his chosen path. He also stole money from his parents and then spent it on prostitutes and gambling. To detach himself even more from his family, he began to call himself Walter instead of Donato. Once he finished middle school, he began earning a living with odd jobs and became increasingly involved in thievery. At the age of 16, Donato stole a car to resell the car radio, but the police discovered and arrested him. Because he was a minor and had a clean record, the court sent him to a correctional institution instead of prison. This punishment did more harm than good, as it allowed him to come into contact with other young criminals and convinced him once again to continue on that path. 2 years later, he was caught again after trying to steal from a church, and this time he ended up in prison. This arrest was only the first in a long series. In the following years, the same pattern continued to repeat itself. Belancia would get out of jail, start stealing again, lose most of the loot in some underground gambling den, and after a while, the police would arrest him again. The turning point for him came around 1984 when he met a professional thief who taught him his secrets. After this meeting, Donato carried out high-profile and much more profitable burglaries. Suddenly he found himself flush with money, so much so that he could easily cover his continuing debts to gambling house owners. But his fortunate period ended abruptly in 1987 when a series of misfortunes marked him deeply. His brother Michel, who had just separated from his wife, committed suicide by throwing himself under a train, taking his 4-year-old son with him. 3 years later, Donato had a serious car accident that put him in a coma for 5 days. These events caused him severe trauma and filled him with anger, which Belancia tried to suppress by continuing his life of theft, gambling, and paid sex. This went on until 1997, when his fury eventually exploded. Donato Belancia was not good at making friends. Many people gravitated to him because he was always flush with money, and he tended to reciprocate every little favor exaggeratedly to compensate for his low self-esteem. Those he called fraternal friends often became profiteers, but some lasted longer than others. And none had lasted longer than Maurizio Parenti. One evening, Maurizio asked Donato to accompany him to a gambling den where he worked as a bouncer. Once there, Belancia began to play and won a massive sum of money. Galvanized by this success, he became a regular at the gambling house, but after the first night, he began to lose big. Soon after, he discovered by accident that he had been cheated. Maurizio, in agreement with gambling house owner Giorgio Centenaro, had lured his friend into the den so that he would lose all his money. Donato Belancia had ignored his traumas for 10 years, but this latest shock triggered in him all the pain he had managed to suppress until then. After crying all night, anger prevailed, and he decided to make them pay dearly. Donato discovered where Giorgio Centenaro lived, and on the evening of October 14, 1997, he went to wait for him under his house. When Centenaro arrived, Belancia accompanied him to his apartment and threatened him with a gun. He had no intention of shooting him because he feared the neighbors would hear the noise. Instead, he ordered Centenaro to take off all his clothes except his underwear, bound him with duct tape, and used his hands to plug his nose and mouth. He allowed him to breathe every now and then as he told him why he was killing him. Finally, he suffocated him with duct tape. Before he left, Belancia removed the tape from the body to leave no clues but left the body in an unnatural position so that people would know Centenaro had been killed. There was a lot of money in the house, but he left without touching it. He hadn't come there for that. 10 days later came Maurizio Parenti's turn. This time, too, Belancia waited for him under his house and managed to enter his apartment on a pretext. He used the same modus operandi, threatening Maurizio with a gun and immobilizing him. Unfortunately, he had not anticipated that Carla Scotto, Mauricio's wife, was also in the house. Belancia emptied the couple's safe to simulate a robbery, then took them into the bedroom and shot them both. By now, he had accomplished his revenge, but from that moment on, he would not be able to stop. After only 3 days, Donato killed another couple, Bruno Solari and Maria Lucia Pitto, owners of a goldsmith shop. He entered their store to rob them, but the couple blindly ran away, and he shot them both. Almost a month passed, and Belancia found himself short of money, so he decided to rob Luciano Mauro, a money changer who lived in the nearby town of Ventimiglia. On November 13th, he sneaked into his house, stole 45 million lire, 32,000 euros today, and killed Mauro so he would not testify against him. This was his last murder with a clear motive. From then on, Donato Belancia would kill to satisfy a murderous impulse. Belancia would never be able to explain what motives prompted him to kill his next victim. It was a Genoese night watchman named Giorgio Canu. The killer chose him out of so many people because he seemed the easiest victim. He followed him for a few nights to know his movements, then shot him on the evening of January 25th. After being inactive for a month, he struck 5 times in March 1998, moving to different locations in the Liguria region. Because he didn't have his own method for choosing his victims, he began to target the easiest victims, prostitutes. He usually approached them by passing for a client, took them to isolated places, and then killed them. In this way, he murdered 3 girls, Albanian Stila Tria on March 9th, Ukrainian Ljudmila Zubskova on March 18th, and Nigerian Tessia Dodo on March 29th. He also committed another robbery-homicide. On March 20th, he robbed and killed Enzo Corni, a money changer, with the same modus operandi he had used on Mr. and Mrs. Solari. On the evening of March 24th, Belancia picked up another prostitute named Lorena Castro in his car. He parked in front of a villa pretending to be the owner, then positioned the vehicle against a tree to block the door on the passenger side. Lorena barely had time to realize what was happening when suddenly 2 night watchmen appeared, Massimiliano Golillo and Candido Rando. Belancia tried to pretend to be the owner, but Lorena denied him and said he wanted to use violence on her. The 2 men wanted to call the station, so he shot them dead. Meanwhile, Lorena had gotten out of the car and hid behind a bush. Belancia shot her in the abdomen, but the shot wasn't fatal. Not only did Lorena save herself, but she was able to provide the police with a sketch of the prostitute killer that would later prove crucial. A few days later, Belancia responded to the advertisement of Luisa Simonelli, a prostitute working from home in San Remo. He went to her apartment and put a gun to her head as soon as they were alone. Terrified, Luisa took a photo of a little child from the bedside table and showed it to the killer. She told him that the child was her son, that his father had abandoned them, and that without his mother, he would be alone in the world. The child in the photo was actually Luisa's nephew, but Belancia believed her story and left without killing her. Later, her testimony would also be vital for his indictment. Until the end of March, no one had yet connected all the murders committed by Donato Belancia, partly because his pattern had changed several times from October to March. Only after Tessia Dodo's death did ballistics manage to establish that the same gun had killed the young prostitutes and the 2 guardsmen. Reports began to circulate that a serial killer was on the loose in Liguria. But police still had no clues as to who the killer was or how many people he had killed. In April, Donato Belancia again changed the pattern of his murders, but this time he alarmed the masses. On April 12th, he boarded a train bound for Venice and saw a young woman alone in a compartment. Her name was Elisabetta Zapetti, and she worked as a nurse in a hospital in Milan. Belancia waited in the corridor for her to get up to go to the bathroom, followed her, and opened the door with a false key. Elisabetta immediately started screaming, but Belancia was faster. He put her jacket over her head and shot her. It was Easter Sunday, so the train was deserted, and no one noticed anything. Belancia got off at the next stop, and shortly afterward, a conductor found Elisabetta's body. This murder triggered a collective psychosis. Unlike prostitutes, this victim had been chosen at random, in broad daylight, in a safe setting. This meant that the killer didn't target a specific group of people. Anyone could have been next. Over the next week, Belancia committed 2 more murders. On the evening of April 14th, he killed another prostitute, Christina Valla, while on April 18th, he again went hunting on trains. This time his victim was Maria Angela Rubino, who was shot to death in the train bathroom, as was Elisabetta Zapetti. This time, before getting off the train, Belancia masturbated and then wiped his hand on her shoulder. The last murder occurred on April 20th, at a service station on the highway between Genoa and Ventimiglia. Belancia filled up his car, then asked gas station attendant Giuseppe Melito for credit until the next day. The man became angry and demanded to have his money immediately. Irritated, Belancia pulled out his gun and robbed him, then fired all his bullets at him and drove away. Throughout the murders, Donato Belancia had always moved around in his car, a black Mercedes. He had bought the car from a friend of his but had never made the transfer of ownership. And because he never paid highway tolls, his friend received an impressive number of fines, so much so that he eventually decided to file a complaint. Upon close examination, the fine showed a correspondence between the murders committed in recent months and the Mercedes movements. Meanwhile, some of Belancia's acquaintances had begun to suspect that he was behind the murders, especially after the sketch was released. Therefore, the police decided to investigate further and put Donato Belancia under surveillance. 2 undercover policemen followed Belancia to a coffee shop one day and observed him drinking coffee. When he was gone, they took a sample of his DNA. Forensics found a match with semen found at Maria Angela Rubino's murder scene. Donato Belancia was finally arrested on May 6, 1998. He confessed to all the crimes, even those that no one had thought to link to him. Police later examined his gun and connected it to the crimes through gunpowder analysis. The trial began in May 1999. Belancia was sentenced to 13 life sentences for the 17 murders and 16 years in prison for the attempted murder of Lorena Castro. The court also stipulated that the first 3 years of his imprisonment would be solitary confinement. Those 3 years would become 11 because Belancia received constant death threats from other inmates. He spent most of his detention in Padua prison. Considered extremely dangerous, he never received any sentence reduction. Only once, in 2017, did he get permission to leave jail under escort to visit his father's grave. Over the next 2 years, he applied for the right to some supervised releases, but each request was denied. In December 2020, Belancia tested positive for COVID-19 and was admitted to Padua Hospital. When his health condition deteriorated, he decided to refuse treatment. 2 weeks later, on December 17th, he died in the hospital at the age of 69. As we conclude our exploration into the life and crimes of Donato Belancia, we are left with a profound sense of unease and introspection. His story serves as a stark reminder of the darkness that lurks within the human soul and the devastating consequences it can unleash upon the world. Yet, amidst the horror and tragedy, there is also a glimmer of hope, a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and our capacity to confront and overcome even the most monstrous of evils. May we carry the lessons learned from Donato Belancia's reign of terror forward, striving always to foster a world where such atrocities can never again take root.